Hello, everyone. I believe, probably a little bit early right now. I know there's a little bit of a delay from when I speak to you actually hearing it, so it may not be early by the time that you hear it. But I just wanted to go ahead and start. I want to first talk about a couple little administrative things. So there's a chat box below this video, and you can type in any questions that you have or comments or whatever in there. And with that, you'll be able to get your questions answered by me. I'll probably talk for a while and then answer questions, because sometimes I'll start answering questions in the middle and everything is broken up and crazy. But if there's something really relevant, I'll try to catch it and actually answer it. But I have to kind of switch to get on to the chat and see what's all happening. But anyway, you can go ahead and type in there if you want to say who you are and that you're here. And also, if you want to let me know that you can hear me, that's great too, because it's always good to know that I don't have any technical difficulties going on right now. I try to wear this headset because I think that you can hear me a little bit better with it. But it's always good to know when it's actually working and everything is good. So the other things are, there are some slides, because there's a couple of different pictures that I have. I have some pictures of cervical fluid and pictures of what's going on during the menstrual cycle. So right under the video, I have a few different links. There's one link to click for the slides. There's another link. Awesome. Happy to hear that I'm heard. So there's one link for the slides, and there's another link that is just going to take you to a spreadsheet, just because this way I can have everyone who's here actually enter, and it's not everyone who just signed up and isn't here. And then there is also a link to the program that is opening up, and I'll be talking a little bit about that later. But basically, the important things for now are the slides, and then if you want to enter that contest to maybe win the free spot in Her Fertility, just write down your name in there, and I'm going to go in at some point during this webinar to just a random number generator, and then someone on that list will win, and I'll ask you to email me or whatever. So anyway, I'm happy to see you are all able to use the chat box and can hear and see me. So awesome. And yes, I can see your questions. So yeah, let's get started. You can click on the slides to see the pictures, and that's kind of the loose format that I'm going to be following, and I'll be answering any questions that you have as well. So basically, we're going to be talking about the menstrual cycle and your most important fertility sign. And the reason I like talking about this most important fertility sign is because it's really often ignored. Even when people try to go for some kind of fertility awareness method, they will instead kind of guess that they're ovulating in the middle of their cycle, or try to count days or something like that. But it's so, so important to actually have a handle on this one sign. And there's two signs that are really important in the method that I teach, but this one sign is the most important thing. So it's really, really cool and important, and I want to talk about it and show you what it is. So this is me, and I'll talk a little bit about basically what made me start doing this and why I really care about it. I know you don't necessarily need to see this picture of me on these slides if you're looking at the slides, but I kind of make it not thinking about the fact that I'm going to also have a video with me talking. So that's why you get two pictures of me. But I basically started using this method myself after having an IUD for 2 years. I had a copper IUD, and I got that because I never wanted to do hormones. I always knew that they weren't really right for me, and I was kind of like crazy eco-conscious person, crazy health-conscious person, at least from the time that I wanted to have a long-term method of birth control. I can't really remember when I started being that way, but basically anytime that I wanted to use birth control, I knew that I wasn't going to use hormones. So I had a fight with doctors basically to actually give me the copper IUD because they don't really like to, or didn't at the time, and now that's kind of changing, but they don't really like to put them in women who haven't had children. And I had to do a lot of work to get it, and I eventually did get it, but I had problems with it, and it was annoying. I had heavier bleeding and cramps when I was on my period. I had weird abdominal trouble, and seriously, most evenings I would look like I was like 5 months pregnant because my abdomen was just fucked up. And I ended up having a leaking Diva cup, which is a little menstrual cup for when you're on your period. And I had used it for multiple years before I got the IUD, and I loved it. And then when I got the IUD, it started leaking, and it wasn't because of overflow problems, and I still don't even really know why, but it just seemed to mess with me in so many different ways. And I decided finally, because I had read about the method that I teach, the symptothermal method, I had read about it around the same time that I got the IUD. I was like, I don't really want a kid. At that point, I didn't want a kid either, ever, which has kind of changed, but I didn't want to get pregnant at all, and I thought I might as well double up on the two most effective methods of non-hormonal birth control. So I started charting my cycles, which is what you do when you use this method. And when I was about halfway through my first cycle that I was ever charting, I hadn't even ovulated yet, I went on a little weekend trip and I forgot my stuff to chart my cycles. Forgot. And I really think that it was a very fear-based thing, and that I was too afraid of really taking control of my reproductive system, my fertility, anything like that, because we're really taught that it's doctors that can do all of that and that really know anything about our reproductive systems. We're not taught that we can understand it ourselves, which we can. So I stopped charting, and I spent 2 years with that darn IUD. And then I finally, after 2 years, was like, why am I dealing with this? You know, intercourse was often painful. That was one that I didn't mention, and all those other side effects. And I said, I have this perfectly good option right here. Why am I not doing this? This doesn't have side effects, and I get to learn so much more about my body if I'm doing this. So I finally started doing it, and it was awesome. I loved it. I could kind of gauge my hormonal health, which was really important to me at the time, because when I first started charting, I realized that my hormonal health actually wasn't that great. And I also was able to have a side effect-free form of birth control and just be able to understand my body more and really appreciate what my body is doing for me all of the time. So it was basically awesome for me. So I decided that, for one thing, I wanted to take a class because I wanted my partner to understand better how it works and trust it more and all of that. And I also wanted to make sure I was doing everything right, because when you just read it out of a book, you're like, I don't really know if I'm doing it right. And also, most people's bodies don't exactly show you what the textbook shows you. So I wanted to get my questions answered, you know? I wanted someone who was knowledgeable in this to talk to. And I could not find that. At the time, there weren't a lot of people teaching online, and there were about 15 certified fertility awareness educators when I first started using it, at least in the US, or that spoke English well. And there wasn't one in my area. So I was like, I should teach this. And I know it's kind of funny because I wanted to take a class and I decided I wanted to teach it. But I started studying like crazy, and then I also got all of the info from those 15 certified fertility awareness educators. And the person in charge of the professional organization, she told me that there was someone developing a teacher training course right then. And while I was self-studying, I was waiting for that teacher training course to open. And it opened, and I got in, and I spent 2 years studying to be a certified fertility awareness educator. And that is now what I am. And I also have been teaching for about a year, more than a year now. But yeah, and it's been awesome, and I love being able to help people with this stuff. And I really, really love doing the advocacy work and just letting people know that there is a viable alternative and that they can understand and trust their bodies. So that's a lot of my favorite stuff about this and how I got into it. So on the next slide, this is one of the visuals, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about the menstrual cycle so you can kind of understand how this method works and why it works. So our menstrual cycle is basically, we count it as like the first day, beginning with our first day of our period, and then the last day before our period. And sometime in between then is when ovulation happens. So basically, in order to use a natural birth control method, something that you are avoiding just unprotected intercourse during that time that you're fertile, because you're not fertile your whole cycle, you need to find when you're fertile. So there's different methods that find this in different ways. Like I was talking about, there's the calculations, but they're not very accurate, because what if your cycle is irregular, or what if you ovulate late because you're super stressed or sick or something like that. So it's really not accurate to count those days. But instead, with this method, what you're doing is you are looking at fertility signs. And those fertility signs happen in your body because of what's happening with your hormones that day. And that's why we're able to get a really accurate fertile window, and that's why if this is learned properly and used properly as birth control, it's over 99% effective. So basically, we have the beginning of the cycle on this page. So if you're not looking at the slides, you might want to look at them. It's the third slide that it has what's happening with the menstrual cycle. And on the right side of this, so the right side of this is the end of the cycle, the left side is the beginning. And on it you see that that's when the period starts, and you have what's going on the top at the level of your ovary, and what's going on with your body temperature after that, and I'll talk to you more about why that's significant. And then what's happening with your hormones in your pituitary gland, which is an endocrine gland in your brain. And then what is happening with your hormones at the level of your ovary. And then what is happening to your uterine lining. So you can see that in the beginning, all of those hormone levels are pretty low. And that is what actually stimulates your period to happen and the uterine lining to shed, is that drop off in hormones from the previous cycle. But then this first hormone that kind of starts coming about is called follicle stimulating hormone, and it's this green line on this sheet that I have the picture of. So that one kind of starts bumping up, and what it does is it makes this follicle grow. And a follicle is a sac around your egg. And you have all of your eggs in your ovaries already, but every month you're going to have certain eggs maturing. And that follicle growing around that maturing egg is what's going to make it mature enough to actually be viable and be ovulated. So as that follicle is maturing, it starts producing estrogen. And you can see estrogen is that yellow line on this, and the yellow line you can see starts going up pretty steeply. And what's really, really cool and special about when estrogen starts to be increased is that that is what produces our first fertility sign that we're going to be talking a lot about today, and that's cervical fluid. So cervical fluid is this substance that's produced inside of your cervix. Your cervix has these little crypts, and that substance makes your vaginal environment and cervical environment more alkaline, which makes it so that sperm can actually survive inside of you. And it also gives like nourishing stuff to your sperm, and it makes these channels that sperm can actually swim through. So as you can see, estrogen levels are going up when the egg is maturing, so getting ready to be ovulated. And when the estrogen levels start going up, it's creating this substance, cervical fluid, that is actually making you fertile. Because without the cervical fluid, you kill sperm. You're like a sperm killer. You have an acidic vaginal environment. Sperm can't swim through your normal like fluids. It's all like a web basically that sperm can't swim through. And it's just not happening. But that cervical fluid is like beautiful loveliness to sperm. And that's actually, during that cervical fluid is the time that you can get pregnant, and it's really the ideal time, because what happens is as that estrogen level increases, then another hormone kicks in called luteinizing hormone, and that hormone is actually like estrogen and luteinizing hormone make each other higher and higher for like a day-ish, and then that makes ovulation happen. But the egg only lives for 12 to 24 hours, and you're only ovulating 1 or 2 eggs. 2 eggs is sometimes happens. 1 does happen unless you're not ovulating that cycle. But if you ovulate 2 eggs, it's always within 24 hours of the first egg because of another hormone that happens. So I hope I'm not confusing you with all of these hormones like first thing right off the bat. But it can get like really in depth if you start going into it. But that ovulation, when that happens, it's really good to have that sperm there ready and waiting. And that's what the cervical fluid does. It creates that environment that the sperm can just live in for a few days and chill, and then once ovulation happens, then the sperm's like, okay, ready to go, and goes up to the egg to actually fertilize it. So once ovulation happens, this is like the last hormone that I'm going to be talking about, then you have progesterone that kicks in. And progesterone, and that's because that follicle, it turns into something called the corpus luteum. And that still produces estrogen like the follicle, but it produces even more progesterone. And the progesterone both dries up cervical fluid, so that first most important fertility sign starts drying up. and it increases your body temperature. So that's your other fertility sign, but it's just not quite as important as cervical fluid because you're only seeing it after ovulation instead of before. So that's a little bit about the menstrual cycle hormones and stuff like that. And I would love to know if you guys have any questions about that, because it just maybe can be confusing. So okay, so there are a couple questions, and I see that name into the Excel spreadsheet. Yes, that is what you do. Is there a chart you're supposed to be seeing? There is. If you click on the slides, that's right below the video, there's a picture of like the hormonal and menstrual, what's happening during the menstrual cycle. So yeah, it looks like you guys have gone to the Excel spreadsheet, but no one's really typed in their name. So yeah, you can type your name into the chart, and do we have time to say it again? Yeah, what would you specifically like me to go over more? And it's really good to look at that picture while I'm talking because, ooh, thank you for letting me know. I guess the spreadsheet is view only, so I'll fix that. And if you can let me know your specific question, then I will do that. Okay. Okay. Sorry, now you can type your name in. So you're all good to go on that. And I can see everyone's sad about that. But yes, you can enter it in now. I just changed it to Can Edit, so you won't have any problem. So the sign to know you're ovulating, we're going to be talking more about that. That is cervical fluid, and I'll be talking more about that. Someone asked if it's possible to ovulate during your period. Yes and no. It's basically that, like, if you have a really long period and an early ovulation, it could be possible. Most of the time, if you are having a real period, meaning that the bleeding is from your actual, like, ovulation taking place and not a different kind of bleed, which there are some different kinds of bleeding, which we're not going to get into because it's a little too much for this webinar, I think. But basically, if it's a real, true period, you pretty much can't make the hormones fast enough because of that drop-off in order to ovulate like early in your period. You have to have a while, and if you did, it wouldn't be a viable ovulation. So it's really when you have that like longer period and you're like spotting for a really long time or something like that, then it's possible. But some people think that they ovulated during their period or right around it because they start learning about the fertility signs, and they say, oh, my cervix is more open, and which your cervix does open more during your period to let the blood come out. And because they see stringy stuff and they think that it's like cervical fluid, but it's really just the lining of your uterus with coming out. So for the most part, it's not, but it's kind of a gray. It's not really a black or white. Okay, awesome. It looks like people are entering their names into the spreadsheet. Amazing. I like the people who entered their names at like random ones that aren't right next to the other ones. It was funny. Okay, so let's talk more about cervical fluid. And if you are following the slides, there is the next slide after the menstrual chart thing. So cervical fluid is your most important fertility sign. And as you maybe can tell from the little bit that I went into the menstrual cycle, it's so important because, for one thing, it's what really defines like how sperm can live inside of you, and that's the most important part of fertility because your egg is only living for 12 to 24 hours. And it's important because it's really opening up that fertile window, saying, hey, now sperm can survive in me, possibly until I ovulate, because that estrogen level is increasing and I can see that there's an egg coming soon and stuff like that. So you're really seeing with that cervical fluid that fertility. And it's opening up the fertile window and also closing it off, because you are seeing that dry up with the progesterone. So there's like the opening of the fertile window and closing off. And the closing off, we also have temperature, which I talked about just a little teeny bit, but it's only confirming that you ovulated instead of both telling you, yes, my fertile window is open, and now my ovulation is over, my fertile window is closed. So it's really, really good to really know a lot about cervical fluid and understand it when you're using a fertility awareness method. So the next slide is another one that's really good to see as a visual. So this is what you can see as cervical fluid. And now there's like infinite variations of things that you can see, because your own body is gonna show different things. And that's one of the reasons that, like, when I started personally charting, I wanted to take a class so bad, because I wanted to be like, hey, is this normal? Hey, am I interpreting this correctly? To someone who knew what they were doing. But it takes, you know, getting acquainted to your body, and then also having someone to ask you the right questions is pretty much the best thing possible when using a method like this. So anyway, these are some pictures of what it looks like. So this middle one is kind of like the least fertile of all of these. This could be how it starts out for some people. Or it could be something in the middle or something like that. But you can kind of see that it starts getting really stretchy and watery when it gets more and more fertile. And it does change in consistency as you're going through that fertile period. And you may have experienced this before yourself and not really known the name for it or what it really was, but you know how sometimes, like, when you're just wiping after you go to the bathroom or whatever, and you'll notice sometimes it's more really dry, kind of rough, sometimes it's smooth, and sometimes it's like slick, and you need just to wipe and wipe and wipe until finally there's nothing there anymore. So that is most of the time attributable to cervical fluid. So now you know, and you are not in the dark about what is happening then anymore. So what you really look for when you are starting to use a method like this is a change from that dry, nothing really feeling to having something there, because that's your body going, hey, my estrogen levels are going up, I'm going to start producing this stuff because I want some sperm to live inside of me until I ovulate. Because your body pretty much wants to get you pregnant all of the time. So it's going to try every month and just produce this stuff. And yeah. So anyway, there's that middle picture with the less fertile one, and you can see that, like, on the finger that it's on, there's not a lot of like water to it and it's just some kind of like sticky, whatever. And that can be how it starts out. And then the other two pictures are more fertile. So you can see one of them is stretching so far, like really just as far as your fingers could stretch. And sometimes that happens. And then the other one, you can really see how much water content is in it. And that's something that when you start noticing your cervical fluid, the closer that you get to ovulation, the more water content there is as well. Okay, so there's lots of questions now. Okay. So someone asked about arousal fluid. That's a really good question. It's not the same as cervical fluid. Cervical fluid has the magic properties of sperm survival and sperm swimming and all of that stuff. Arousal fluid is really just to like lubricate you when you're having sex. So arousal fluid, like when you start, it's something that you kind of get the feeling for and get the hang of when you start really watching your body. But arousal fluid is usually thinner, and with cervical fluid, you can kind of see in those photos that I had that cervical fluid really, it's like you could go just pull your fingers apart for so long and it's just still there. And like if you put it in water, it wouldn't really dissolve. It's like more gummy or more like egg white or something like that. But arousal fluid dissolves pretty quickly, and it really doesn't have as much staying power as cervical fluid. But arousal fluid, it doesn't make you, like if you didn't have fertility signs and then you had arousal fluid and you had unprotected intercourse, like if you're asking if it makes you get pregnant or like helps sperm survive, no. Then how long can sperm survive if your cervical fluid is present? So sperm can survive, in general, the tops is up to 5 days. But basically when you're using a method like this, usually about 5 days before you ovulate is a lot of times when people start producing cervical fluid anyway. But when you're using a method like this, like any change from not having any cervical fluid to having cervical fluid puts you in that fertility window because you don't know how quickly you're going to ovulate after that. And then if I don't have cervical fluid, let's say on my underwear, is it a must that I need to go inside and get it? What if I'm fertile but don't have that much wet fluid, if that makes sense? So first of all, I wouldn't say underwear is the best way to check your cervical fluid. I can be like super fertile and still not have anything on my underwear. It's really just not necessarily the best way to notice cervical fluid. Some people it works really well for. So there's different ways of checking your cervical fluid, and for different people, different things work. I cover all of those like different ways that you can really do it in my course and in one-on-ones and stuff like that. But underwear, I would say, is usually one of the, like, it doesn't work for a lot of people. Do you need to go inside and get it? No, but you can do experiments on yourself and check and see if something is, it seems very different inside versus outside, because you should be seeing it outside, and a lot of times what you're noticing inside is like vaginal cell slough or other kinds of fluids. So what you really want to pay attention for is changes. How many days can your cervical fluid be present? That really depends. For most people who have really good hormonal health, it's gonna be, you know, somewhere in between, like, I'll say like 7 to 3 days, depending on your age and stuff like that. But it's also going to depend on your hormonal health, because some people with, for instance, like polycystic ovarian syndrome, that has an increased amount of estrogen generally. For most women, that comes with increase in estrogen. And estrogen is what creates that cervical fluid. So that's one of the reasons that it's really cool using this method, is because of that hormonal health monitoring that you can see, and also being able to watch your hormonal health if you are making changes to your diet and lifestyle and stuff like that, and trying to figure out what's making a difference and what's not, because you have consistent feedback on a daily basis of what's going on with your hormones, and you can see trends over time. So anyway, in those cases, you can have cervical fluid for a longer time. A lot of times when women are breastfeeding, they can have cervical fluid for a longer time, because their estrogen isn't reaching that peak that starts that luteinizing hormone and that feedback that I talked about. So your estrogen just kind of is like, I'm trying to ovulate, but you're not quite there yet. And that can create that cervical fluid, but have ovulation not happen yet. So in those cases, cervical fluid can be longer. Sometimes in instances of stress or illness, if you have enough estrogen to create that cervical fluid but not quite enough to ovulate yet, it can be longer. But in general, there's the general, like, good hormonal health, you're good, is going to be 5-ish days usually. If you are typically dry, what does the fluid look like before you ovulate? I don't think I understand that question fully. Yeah, I don't think I understand it fully. But the fluid can vary from person to person before you ovulate. So, does the fertile fluid only last for a day? No. It can last for, like I talked about, different days for different people. Once you've ovulated, the temp has risen. Yeah. The temperature goes up after you ovulate. Is it normal for your cervix to always be low? It's going to depend. Some people's cervical changes are really slight, and that's why it's, you know, the optional fertility sign instead of cervical fluid and temperature. Cervical changes can be very slight. Also, I would definitely recommend checking around the same time every day, and also noting other changes, like if you feel any change in softness or openness of the opening or anything like that. That's really good to note those changes. You might not notice a difference in the change of the height, and also positioning, because some people's uterus is a little bit tipped, and instead of the cervix just going up and the uterus just going up when you ovulate, it can tip a little bit but like straighten out. So even though it kind of went up, your cervix still seems like it's about in the same position in your vaginal canal. No. The fluid, if it's not egg white, it is not okay to have unprotected sex. Any cervical fluid before ovulation can be considered part of your fertile time. So you definitely want to make sure you're noting for that change. I call it the point of change, when you're going from whatever your normal pattern is, which for most people is basically dry. For some people it will be a teeny bit of like sticky or something like that, to a change. And when you have that change, that's your body saying things are changing, estrogen levels are going up, I'm producing cervical fluid now. So even if it doesn't look like egg white, if it's a change, you know that something's going on different with your body, and there's a potential for ovulation to happen soon. There's a potential for sperm to be surviving until ovulation happens, and you don't want to chance any of that. Yeah, with the cervix, I would just, well, first of all, I would put your other fertility signs above your cervix. But also, yeah, I don't think, honestly, I don't like to really deal with my cervix that much either, just because I think it's better for it to be left alone instead of constantly being like poked and prodded and palpated and stuff like that. So I totally understand you don't want to poke around it too much. And I would say that if your other or fertility signs are good for you, don't worry about your cervix. Like, you don't need to use it. It's just another sign that's influenced by estrogen, just like cervical fluid. Charts overwhelm and confuse me. I would say that overall, in the beginning with this method, if you don't have a really, well, how did you learn the method? That's what I would ask if you've already learned it. Because a lot of times if you're just trying to like learn from a chart and just guess, that's really overwhelming and confusing. And if you actually learn from like one source, and I would say that's a lot less overwhelming and confusing. Yeah, Shannon asked if the signs will still show if your period is only 3 days long and extremely light, like spotting light. Well, the great thing about this method is that understanding these signs is really going to help you understand like what's happening with your period, why it's like that. So for you, it could be that maybe you aren't ovulating, maybe, and I'm not saying that's for sure, so don't worry about it, but like it could be that you're not ovulating, and that's why your period is basically not really, like, it's very light and not long, and it's just like spotting, stuff like that. So with understanding these fertility signs, what you see can help you know, am I ovulating? What's happening with my estrogen levels? What's happening with my progesterone levels? Why is this happening? And is there anything that I should be working on or worrying about or anything like that? And of course, seeing if any changes that you're making are actually helping you understand or helping you get better, your hormonal health get better. So someone asked about checking your cervical fluid. Yeah, so underwear, like I said, not the best. Going inside, generally not the best because it confuses people. So the simplest thing and the thing that I teach to start out with, for everyone to start out with, take a piece of toilet paper, fold it flat so that your cervical fluid doesn't get lost in any crinkles, and wipe. And that will, you'll both pay attention to the sensation that you have. So if it's normally dry and then all of a sudden it's smooth, you know, oh, there's a change. And then also you look at that paper, you look at what there is, and you just take a little bit of it off and test it and see if there's anything there. So that is the way that I recommend to start for everyone. And there are other ways that you can do it if that doesn't work for you. But I would say that is the best way. Most of the time, a lot of people learn out of taking charge of your fertility or something like that. It says check your cervical fluid before you go to the bathroom. That is not a good idea. I mean, you can check it before you go to the bathroom, but for most people, you're going to see a lot of it after you go to the bathroom because it helps your muscles when they're contracting. It helps the cervical fluid move down to your vaginal opening. So if you're not checking after you go to the bathroom and you're not noticing that you have a lot of cervical fluid, that might be why. And it's definitely a good idea to check after. So hopefully that answered your question. If not, you can do, oh yeah, it looks like you said, oh, okay. Yeah, I made my own chart, and I mean, that's what I use with my clients and everything now too, but I didn't really like any of the charts that were out there, so I made my own. Peak days is basically the last day that your cervical fluid is the most fertile that you have. So like whatever kind of fertile cervical fluid you have, like if your most fertile is like that egg white stretchy fluid, the last day that you have that kind of peak fluid is the last day that is your peak day, and you use that to do a count. And it's, I think, overly complicated in most books and for most teachers. I simplify it by really going into what is peak type fluid, what is not peak type fluid. Those are the two classifications you make, and that makes it a lot easier to find your peak day. But yeah, that's all in my course that I teach. And Kegels, Kegels might help you get it down if you're finding that you're not able to get your cervical fluid down. So yeah, I would definitely recommend trying that if you're having any problems. Someone else, during your fertile time, is it safe to have unprotected sex as long as he doesn't ejaculate inside of you? Well, that's not using the symptothermal method. That is using withdrawal. And withdrawal officially, according to studies, is 96% effective with perfect use. So that means you are always pulling out before ejaculation, and you are not getting any kind of semen on anywhere close to even your vulva. Because if you have cervical fluid around the outside of your vulva, sperm can swim right up it. So as long as you're using it perfectly and you're okay with 96% effectiveness, yes, have at it. And that's your own decision to make, but it's not using the symptothermal method. So if you want that over 99% effectiveness, don't use that. It's totally up to you whether you would want to use that time to use withdrawal. And I just want to also quickly say, if anyone came after I made this announcement, if you want to enter to win a spot in Her Fertility, click on the link below this video that says click here to enter the contest and type your name in that spreadsheet, and I'm going to be doing a random number generator for whoever wins. So, taking charge of your fertility and temperature, yes. What happens if you get up at 5 a.m. to use the bathroom and feed pets, but go back to sleep and wake up for the day at 6:30? When do you take your temperature? That's up to you. Me personally, what I would do is I would do an experiment. I would take it at 5 a.m. one cycle, and I would take it at 6:30 another cycle, or take it at both in the same cycle is an even better experiment. And I know it's kind of annoying for one cycle, but I mean, what's that, 30 days, big deal. And check, is your temperature shift on the same day? Are you having these weird outlying temperatures? And then well, is 6:30, like, is it affecting my temperature to get up and go to the bathroom and feed my pets? And then this rest that I'm getting, is it enough to kind of like give me this good basal temperature? Or is it totally throwing off my temperatures because I'm sensitive to getting up and whatever, and I should really take my temperature at 5? So I would do a test, personally. If you don't want to do a test and you're just like, no, I just want to know which one, I would take it at 5. Because for some people, getting up to go to the bathroom and feeding pets and stuff like that is going to change their temperature. But for some people, it really won't. So you'll have to check for yourself, like, whether it works for you. I've been on and off birth control for several weeks now, and I'm charting. But my main worry is that as a long distance runner, I've been amenorrheic for quite a while without the help of added hormones, and want to see if I even have a period this month. I love the method, but I'm worried that it may be risky for me. Any suggestions? Well, for one thing, I wouldn't worry if your period doesn't immediately come back, because for a lot of people, even people who aren't long distance runners, it takes a little bit for your body to kind of reset and adjust and all of that stuff. I would say definitely, like, if you're worried about your body composition or anything like that, I would make sure that you are definitely eating well and enough, and that you aren't depriving yourself in that way. Running can, for some people, really throw off their hormones, but if you have been doing it like all throughout puberty and all of that stuff, it may not for you, because your body just might be used to it. So I would say one thing is I would read my article on coming off hormones and look at those suggestions for, like, getting hormones cleared through your liver, like supporting your liver, and food suggestions. And I would kind of, if you're not already doing that kind of stuff, I would try to incorporate that in to help you hopefully have better hormonal health and getting the old hormones out of your body, and then see what happens. Also, it's great to use this method, because I swear I keep talking about this, but this is literally my favorite thing about this method, is like that it's so empowering, and that it is so awesome for knowing what's going on with your hormones. Because normally all we really have is like, okay, my periods come this far apart, and this is what my period looks like, and that's all you really have. But with this method, you know what's going on with your estrogen, you know what's going on with your progesterone, you know when you're ovulating, you know if you're ovulating. And there's all this information that you have about your body, and you can see how changes that you make really affect your hormones. So I think that that's the coolest thing, and I would definitely I would definitely say also, as you're coming off of hormones, don't use this method as birth control, because it can fuck up your cervical fluid basically for a while. So you want to let your body reset. But I would definitely chart and just pay attention to what your body is doing. What if in the morning you have no fluid and you have sex, but at night you have fluid? With this method, before ovulation, you are supposed to wait until the evening in order to determine that you don't have fluid, because you otherwise don't know. You could be like all night creating cervical fluid and you don't know it because you just woke up and you haven't checked, or gravity hasn't brought it down yet, or something like that. So I would definitely not use the mornings before ovulation. I would use the evenings, and that is part of the rules of the method that makes it over 99% effective. So I would definitely make sure that you totally have a handle on how to use the method. You know, take my course, read Taking Charge of Your Fertility, whatever you need to do to make sure that you really understand how to use it, because that's really important. You don't want to just use it and not really know what you're doing. All right, so let's see. Okay. So we have people sign up, and I want to do this drawing soon. So if you're not signed up, sign up, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my program. So while you're signing up, if you just came off of birth control 2.5 months ago, there's a good chance you haven't even ovulated yet, maybe. So that's probably why charting is confusing. It's great to chart to get in the habit. It's like awesome to really understand everything that's going on, get in the habit, see your fertility returning, but use a backup method. Use something else until your hormones start to regulate. How long after ovulation should you wait to have unprotected sex, according to the symptothermal method? You should make sure that you understand the method very well, like I said, before you use it. We don't pinpoint ovulation exactly. What we have is a count after temperature and after our peak day. And that is how we get an accurate, we know a very accurate window of when ovulation happened, and then we're able with that count to take the buffer. My course, if you click below the video, Learn Fertility Awareness, there's the page that talks about what's all in it, and I'm going to be talking about it right now too. And it also has the ability to buy it on that page too. So anyway, that is highly recommended if you go look at that, but I'll talk about my course in a minute. And yeah, definitely. I always, like, I'm a big advocate of, if you like exercise a lot or you eat super healthy and you feel like you might not be eating enough, I think it's super important. A lot of people don't eat enough. I mean, a lot of people eat too much, but a lot of people also don't eat enough. So it's really good to make sure that you aren't eating too little. So anyway, I'm going to be talking about my course now. So I have an awesome online course teaching this method, and the reason that I created it online is because I want it to be accessible to people wherever. Like I said, there's not a lot of certified fertility awareness educators out there, and it's so important to work with them when you're learning this method. Not everyone needs it, because some people have these perfect textbook cycles and they totally understand everything after reading the book and whatever. But for a lot of people, you're going to have fears and doubts and be like, I don't really know what I'm doing and I want to talk to someone about this and all this stuff. So that is why I think it's really important, and I brought it to the online world, because I wanted people to be able to have access to it wherever they are. Anyway, my course includes basically video modules that is teaching you, going through step by step, how to use the method, everything. It's talking about going more into depth on what's happening during your menstrual cycle, what exactly cervical fluid is, pictures of what it looks like throughout, like, the cycle, going from the beginning to the end, and talking about like what's changing in it, what you're seeing, all this stuff, and just how to chart on a day-by-day basis. Like, What are you seeing? What are you putting in on your chart every day? What's going on? So it's like a really thorough way to learn how to use the method. Then you're also having personal support. So I have one-on-one personal support built in for everyone who gets my course. So they're able to work with me personally and ask questions about what's going on with their bodies, what's going on with their charts, you know, is this normal, is this abnormal, am I fertile at this time, am I not fertile at this time? So you really get a hang of it and understand everything you're doing before you're like set free to do it. And then also you have a private Facebook group that you're able to use if you want to in order to get peer support and also support from me if you have like a little question and you want to post some like picture of cervical fluid or anything like that. It's a really great resource to have. And then there's also office hours that are group, and you can ask questions during that time as well. So the one-on-one's super, super valuable, and then you also have these other avenues of asking questions. Then it also has, in addition to video modules, an ebook guidebook. So if you prefer to read instead of watch videos, there are a couple of videos that are really important to watch anyway, like the one on cervical fluid and learning how to chart and stuff like that, because just the way that it's gone through visually, it's so much better anyway. But yeah, like there's books and there's basically like cheat sheet handouts, like little things like here's the rules all on one page. Here is how you figure out what phase of your cycle you're in, all on one page, so that it's just really easy to look at and go. And then you also have other like reading lists and stuff like that for support for if you're trying to work on anything with like hormonal health or charting or anything like that. So I think it's a really awesome course, and if you are wanting to learn this or you've learned it but you're still totally confused, I would totally recommend signing up for this course. There's also a guarantee on it, so if you sign up for it and you're like, fuck this crap, I don't even want to be in here anymore, I hate fertility awareness, you can just email me and be like, hey, I don't want to be in this anymore, and I'll give you your money back. Like, I don't care. I just want you to be able to learn it and understand it and feel super confident about what you can notice in your body and understanding everything. So anyway, definitely check that out. There's a link right below this video, Learn Fertility Awareness, and that will take you to the page for my course explaining more about what it is, who I am, anything like that. Okay, so I am going to do this raffle thing, contest, whatever it is, and we'll see who wins. Okay, so the winner is Elizabeth Perez. So Elizabeth, hopefully you are still here, and congratulations. If you could email me at Hannah@Holistic Hormonal Health, and we will get you all set up to take the course. And for everyone else, I would love to see you in the course as well. So click on that link, check it out, see if it's right for you, and I would love to have you. And if you have any other questions, feel free to ask me. And yay, congratulations. So yeah, if you have any other questions, you can feel free to ask me. If you have any questions about the course, I'll hang out for a minute and answer. And if you have any questions about fertility awareness or anything like that, I would also be happy to answer. And of course, though, I'm always like #1 going to tell you, like, you need to learn the method well first, because it is really important that you have a really good handle on it, and that you're not just like downloading an app or you know, using something like a chart and just guessing, or looking online and like trying to figure it all out. Like, you really need to go through a comprehensive course, or read a book, like a good book on it. So yeah, but yeah, I would love to answer any questions if anyone has them. So I'm gonna hang out for a couple minutes and see if anyone wants to ask any questions. I know there's a little delay, that's why I'm just like, oh, I'll hang out. Yeah, you can start anytime with the course. What it is I kind of curate it for you. So as soon as you go in, you'll start getting emails for like the first part of it. But I basically have it broken into sections so that you don't get too overwhelmed. And I email you out like, here's this part, here's this part, here's this part, and give you little reminders and tips and stuff like that. So yeah, it's an anytime course that you can take. I would definitely recommend, if you're like confused and too much info about the book, well, for one thing, I am developing a small offering for people who just, I mean, it's going to be like something where you can ask like 1 or 2 questions. So for people who have done something like read Taking Charge of Your Fertility, like, I know all of the pain points around that. I've worked with it so much, and I see where people like the little things that they don't get with that book and stuff like that. It's an amazing book, but there's some places where it falls short. So I'm developing a small thing that's just going to be like relatively cheap. It's going to be like a $15 to $20 thing, and like if you, like, you have charts and stuff like that, and you just submit them, and then it's like a group kind of thing, and you ask like a question or 2. So if you have already read that and you're like confused and you feel like you just have like a couple of questions, there's that I'm going to be starting soon, but I haven't yet. But as long as you're on my mailing list, you'll hear about that. But if you like need to learn the method from scratch, just jump in my course, or you feel like it's just way too confusing from the books that you've read or anything like that, I would definitely recommend just taking the course, because working with someone individually is so invaluable. Like, I wish I had that at the beginning of when I started charting, but I didn't, and I had to spend a really long time figuring it all out myself, and then really understanding, like, okay, there's someone with this and someone with this, and this is what's happening, and figuring it out for myself and everyone at the same time. So, yeah, I think, yeah, you're in LA. I haven't done any LA meetups yet, but I would actually really like to. I look on Facebook. There's a Facebook group called Los Angeles Fertility Awareness, and it's really small, and I started it. Go like that group or join it or whatever it is, and because if I ever do meetups in LA, I mean, I'll probably have it on my mailing list as well, but I would definitely be posting them in that group because it's LA specific. So I would definitely go request to join that group. Los Angeles Fertility Awareness, I think, is what it's called. If you search Los Angeles Fertility Awareness on Facebook, I'm sure you'll find it. Okay, so if there's not any other questions about the course or fertility awareness or anything like that, I'll be heading out soon. But I want to thank you all for coming today. I had a great time. I love doing these webinars. I think it's so fun. And yeah, I would definitely, like, you should be on my mailing list if you signed up for this webinar. If not, and you're like, whoa, that little short couple questions thing that she was talking about sounds really interesting to me, or something like that, hop on my mailing list. If you really want to learn fertility awareness, totally sign up for my course, because it's really awesome and totally valuable, and I would love, love, love to have you in it. It's going to be a blast. So anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and thank you again for coming. Bye.